It's Kentucky, it's Tennessee. It's a huge rivalry in the SEC. We bring in Kevin McGuffey from Last Word on College Football to help us talk about the Cats and the Vols. Kevin, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Mark. Thanks for having me on again. Always fun to get on here and talk some SEC football with you.
No doubt about that. Love college football. Kentucky putting together a decent season despite what happened in Starkville last week. The Cats at 5-2, 2-2 in the SEC, and Tennessee, wow, still looking for a first win in the conference. So before we spin ahead towards Saturday, Mississippi State, Kentucky, to me, it sounded like, okay, a couple mid-level SEC teams going at it. The Bulldogs were about a 12 or 13-point favorite. I was, number one, a bit surprised in that. I thought the point spread should have been a whole lot closer, but Vegas maybe didn't know what it was talking about, but more so than I did, because it turned out to be a rout in Mississippi State's favor at 45-7. Now, it was a close game through much of the first half, but some breakdowns late in the first half kind of spelled doom for the Cats.
Yeah, well, you're not the only one who thought the point spread was off, because I said all week, I'm like, there is no way this should be a 12 or 13 point spread. So Vegas is going to get this one wrong. And, for the first part of the game, it looked like it. But, yeah, as you said, it was a close game, first quarter and a half, kind of playing back and forth. And then Kentucky had a 3rd and 1 somewhere around midfield. They decided, 99 times out of 100, they'd run Benny Snell, run the Wildcat or something. And Eddie Gran decided to take a chance, and they threw a deep ball, and the tight end was open. The receiver was open. Just Steven Johnson underthrew the ball. Then the Cats punted, and just a few plays later, they had Mississippi State on a fourth down around midfield, and just totally broke down on containment. And Fitzgerald ran one in for about 45-yard touchdown, put him up 17-7 at the half, took all the momentum, and basically Kentucky just got, swamped, for lack of a better word, in the second half. It was probably, obviously the worst performance they've had this year, probably the worst since the Florida game, last year, which they also lost that one 45-7. So, just, a lot of people were, pretty upset about the play calling. They've been upset about the play calling, all year, but obviously you can't please everybody. When they run the ball, they think they should pass it. When Eddie Graham wants to pass the ball, they think he should run it. But like I said, it was just a bad, and especially coming off a bye week, it was just, it was like a lot of people like, what were you guys doing for the last 2 weeks? You knew what Fitzgerald was going to do. Dual threat quarterbacks have always been a thorn in Kentucky's side, and it turned out that way again. I think he ended up with 260 total yards and 3 touchdowns. So I said it was a bad week. There was some comments on social media after the game, like, Blake Bone got on Snapchat and said we need to be throwing the ball every down. The father of 3rd-string quarterback Gunnar Hoke got on Twitter and said we should be throwing the blankety ball, forget running it. We should be throwing the ball downfield every play. So, but that's, if you've watched Kentucky, that's not the way Eddie Gran, and Darren Henshaw run things. They're a run first offense. So anyway, so now that's over. Now we're on to Tennessee this week, trying to break the streak of only beating the Vols once since 1984. So the game in 2011, when Kentucky had played with a third string wide receiver at quarterback and won the game.
Kevin, name me the team that throws the ball downfield every play or nearly every play and wins. Where does this team exist? I don't know where they are. And if they do exist, they're in the group of 5. They're in the Mountain West. They might be in the Big 12, but they're not very good in the Big 12. And they're certainly not in the SEC. Name me an SEC team that has ever featured throwing the ball downfield all the time and won. It doesn't happen. You have to have a running game. You have to mix it up. You have to keep the defense guessing and honest. This is just fundamental at this level. You just can't get away with that.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. What it stems back to, I mean, we're going back actually 20 years now when Hal Mumme was the coach, at Kentucky with the air raid. He was the coach. You had Tim Couch, as the quarterback, and they did throw the ball, probably 75% of the time, but they also had, some good running backs, to so that the defense couldn't key on the passing game every time, you keep them honest. But yeah, I mean, maybe like Texas, Texas Tech or somebody, or, even, Neil Brown, who was the offensive coordinator here, at Kentucky when Stoops first got hired, and of course is now the coach at Troy. Everybody thinks that's the offense, they should be running, and especially after Troy beat LSU, but then they turned around and laid an egg in their last game. So, but yeah, no, you're right. They don't, I mean, you're never going to please everybody, right? So why even try?
We're talking Kentucky football with Kevin McGuffey from Last Word on College Football. The Cats are 5-2 heading into its rivalry matchup with the Tennessee Volunteers. So it's not necessarily a midseason grade because we're 7/12 through the season, 7 games in, 5 to go. But what would you make of this team? So I was hoping to be able to talk to you, Kevin, this week after the Mississippi State game and say you were this close from being undefeated, because that was the scenario heading to Starkville. The Florida game should have been won, and otherwise UK was at 5-1, but they let down, obviously, as we discussed, in the second half against Mississippi State. But still at 5-2, it could be a really, really good season.
Oh, you're exactly right. If the Cats, were to can win the game on Saturday, the schedule is pretty favorable. Honestly, the game at Georgia coming up on November 18th, I don't think anybody is going to think Kentucky, has a chance. I'm sure the ESPN index will be like 98% for Georgia. But, after this game, they have Ole Miss coming up. And, Shea Patterson, of course, is gone for the season. So, that should help Kentucky's chances, and that game is at home. Then they go down to Vanderbilt. That one I think is still a toss-up. Vanderbilt's kind of been an up and down. They started off really hot and they've struggled since then. And then, like I said, then you have Georgia. You got Georgia after that, and then Louisville. Louisville's the same way. What team's gonna show up? The team that lost to Boston College, or the team that went down to Florida State on Saturday, this past Saturday, and won in Tallahassee. I mean, I think I predicted them 8-4 before the season, and I think that's still a very doable, prediction and a very doable record.
Kevin McGuffey joining us from Last Word on College Football to talk Kentucky, Tennessee. The Vols missing John Kelly, their star running back, who was cited for marijuana possession on Wednesday. Obviously, that's going to cripple the Tennessee offense, which is much reliant on the running game with a freshman quarterback in play in Jarrett Garantano. Your thoughts about Tennessee? How much have you seen the Vols this year? I got to let you know that so I saw opening night against Georgia Tech. They got completely outplayed, coughed up the ball late, did Georgia Tech, going in for a 2-score lead. Tennessee, to its credit, pulled the game out despite giving up like 560 yards of rushing offense. Saw some of the Georgia game that was a complete debacle. They got throttled in that game. Should have beaten Florida on the road in the swamp, but we know what Felipe Franks pulled off from 65 yards out on the last play of the game. Let's see, Tennessee, the Alabama game I didn't even bother with. We know what the conclusion was there. So the Vols, pretty talented team. The recruiting rankings would point to that over the last several years, top 15 classes, but really unraveling at this point and looking at a possible 0-5 start.
Yeah, I mean, it's when I was trying to think when the last time Tennessee started 0-5, 0-5 in the conference. Like I said, I've watched a lot of the, I watched the Alabama game. I watched, bits and pieces of a lot of their games this year. And like I said, they've struggled with, the quarterback. John Kelly had been their biggest asset. And, I think he had 600, I think he was fourth in the SEC in rushing right now with 600 and I think it's 620 yards. And, that's going to be a big, I'm not sure who their backup is, but, knowing Kentucky's luck, the guy will come in and rush for like 200 yards and 5 touchdowns. Cause that's what always seems to happen. But, I think, like I said, it's a game Tennessee, obviously Tennessee needs, because let's face it, we all know the speculation about Butch Jones. There are a lot of people that thought he was going to be fired, would have been gone after the Alabama game. But, I can't remember, I saw a poll somewhere that on one of the websites this morning that said, would you root for Kentucky if you knew that if they beat Tennessee that they would fire Butch Jones? And like 40% of the vote was yes, we'll root for Kentucky, which I think is just crazy. But he's doing, he's trying. You can make all the comments about champions of life and everything, but the interesting thing, I'm sure you probably remember this, was that when Mark Stoops was hired, Butch Jones was one of the top names on the list for Kentucky, because he was a pretty hot name at the time, and he's done I think he's done a great job. I mean, a really pretty good job at Tennessee. Maybe not by Tennessee standards, but going back to your comment, I think losing Kelly is going to be a big hit to him, and the weather. It's another thing. The weather on Saturday night here is forecast to be miserable, like rain and a cold rain of a high, game time temperature like in the 30s possibly, which which means going to lend yourself to the running game, and you would think, based on what we just talked about earlier, that would play into Kentucky's strengths, with Benny Snell and Ziam King, those guys. That hopefully the hope is that they'll be able to just ball control, but. As I said, it's a rivalry game, and more often than not, as you said, like the Florida, the games, some of the games this year, the Georgia Tech game, Tennessee seems to find ways to win. Then there's no way they should win.
Your colleague Mike Laval, right there with Last Word on College Football, who joins me on a regular basis to talk Tennessee, has sealed Butch Jones's fate. It's over. It's done after they lost to South Carolina, coming off a bye week. Another game in which I forgot that I had watched most of that game against South Carolina, a game that they could have easily won, that they bogged down in the red zone right near the goal line at the end of the game with a chance to win. Anyway, Butch Jones, fate sealed, done. 3-4 now, most likely looking at about a 6-6 season. But to your point, regardless of what Tennessee does here, which most likely they're going to move on and say goodbye to Butch Jones and hopefully get a coach for their sake that can bring them to the prominence that they once had in the SEC throughout the 90s up until the mid-2000s. But it can't be discounted what Butch Jones accomplished. He took a program that was winning 4 and 5 games and really recruited extremely well, changed the recruiting philosophy, brought in and kept in the in-state recruits, made it more of a national recruiting base for Tennessee. And they, back-to-back years, won 9 games, finished in the top 15 in the country, won their bowl games. And so he definitely upped the level of play on the field, and it's much more sustainable, it appears, and to be in much better shape for the next coach than certainly what Butch Jones found in Knoxville when he arrived.
So, yeah, I totally agree 100% with everything you're saying. So, I'm sure you've heard the rumors, that, Mike could probably speak more about this, than me, being more the Tennessee expert. But, you've heard that, Lane Kiffin and, John Gruden, the groomers. I think it's like a hashtag groomers now. I think I've seen with the Tennessee football program. I mean, I know they think, and as you said, they have some of the best facilities. It's one of year in, year out. It's been one of the best programs. I think they'll get, they'll probably go after some big name coaches, and they may strike out. But I don't see, if I was, especially like an up and comer, that would be a job I would jump at. Somebody like Cliff Kingsbury or somebody, at Texas Tech. I mean, that would be somebody I would look at if I were in the hiring a coach, if you're wanting a young up and comer. But
yeah, it's a place where you can gain support. You've got facilities, you've got a fan base, you have the money, the resources. It's not the best of recruiting hotbeds, but it's decent. It's good enough. Then you can go elsewhere and certainly get into the Carolinas and Georgia and Virginia, and they've even gone out to California, plucked away some very good players. So Tennessee has a lot to offer a next head coach. I, like you, think that most likely, instead of going for the hot name, the big name, what typically happens is the hotshot coordinator that's coming up the ranks or head coach at the group of 5 level is the guy that you aim for, a guy that's up and coming, probably in his 40s, and ready to explode and ready to take that first big step on the big stage. All right, Kevin McGuffey from Last Word on College Football getting us set for Kentucky and Tennessee, with the Cats trying to go to 6-2 and gain bowl eligibility. Kevin, we appreciate the discussion.
Thank you again, Mark, for having me on. As I said, always great to get on here and talk SEC football with you. I really, really appreciate it.